That, which Steve related to, was the story of where I was born. It was a part of London called Southam Street. My mother, who lived in Liverpool and was the beneficiary of the Homes for Heroes that the Liberal government after the First World War were determined to build. The actual budget started being cut in about 1923, but they had by then they'd built this estate in Wareham Road in Liverpool, where my Auntie Peggy still lives, which had a front garden, a back garden, an indoor toilet, a bathroom. And it was amazing for working people to move into those kinds of, that kind of accommodation. She came to London during the war to serve in the NAFI. She met a soldier. She moved to his part of London, which was this Goulburn ward of what is now called, thanks to your lot, Bob, Notting Hill, which has become a huge kind of generic term. It was actually Kensal Town. We used to call it the town. And Goulburn, the Goulburn ward, I say in the book, in the 1951 census, whereas the density of more than 2 people to a room across London was 2.6, in this particular ward it was 13%. The houses, Roger Main, incidentally, a great photojournalist, went to Southam Street between 1955 and 61, and his photographs have been in various exhibitions, various books you can buy about it. He photographed that squalor of houses condemned in the 1930s, but that we were still living in. Now, I now realise why that was. If you think back to that post-war period, the absolute priority was to get more houses. And slum clearance was put in abeyance for many years, because there was no good clearing the slums if you didn't have anywhere to send people to. My mother spent her whole young life on the council waiting list, and the offer of a council house in Welwyn Garden City came 2 weeks after she died. So and I now see that being recreated. And if you think back politically, and this is an interesting point, Bob, and I think this is about the kind of priority we need to give to housing. Crikey, when I stood my fantastically successful campaign to be deputy leader of the Labour Party, we held debates right across the country. There was only one person, John Cruddas, talking about housing. So, you know, it was a non-issue, or it was the domain of a few people. Many of you may be in this room, but it never got the political impetus that it needed. Well, post-war, of course, Nye Bevan wasn't in the cabinet because he was responsible for health. He was in the cabinet because he was responsible for housing as well. Health wasn't a cabinet position before Nye Bevan, and wasn't a cabinet position after Nye Bevan until the late 70s. Housing was. Housing was. And you know, despite the problems post-war, lack of materials, lack of skilled labour, Nye managed to get to 228,000 new houses built in 1948. There was a real political imperative. His successor but one, Harold Macmillan, cabinet position as Minister for Housing. Health had been taken away, it was back to a Minister of State position. He managed to build 300,000 houses around the mid-50s. But you can see the issue here, and I agree with some of the experts I've read that having a numbers game is not helpful at all, because you hoist the number up and you just, you know, everyone focuses on that rather than some of the wider issues. But at least there was a political imperative near the top of the agenda. And yes, they didn't do everything right. If you go to Southam Street now, you'll see Trellick Towers. And Trellick Towers was kind of the beginning of that high-rise kind of mistake. It's now retrieved thanks to the tenants and lots of other reasons, but that mistake of going to high-rises, to isolated estates with no transport, big, soulless council estates. Of course, there are lessons to be learned from those times. Nye Bevan said a wonderful thing. He said in one of his excellent speeches on housing, he talked about the living tapestry of a mixed. He didn't talk about 3 minutes left. No. He talked about the living tapestry of a mixed community. And of course now, actually, that's much more part of the political mainstream on housing.